current generation of gaming, considerable advances in the quality of games have been made. Graphics are amazing, controls are going in new directions, and the ability to play online allows players to use video games in ways that were once inconceivable. There's just one problem. Everything breaks. Blame who you will, but in this age of disposable electronics, it's hard to say if our Wii's, PS3s, Xbox 360s, and their game discs will work in 20 years. Conversely, cartridge-based consoles have been proven to be very resilient. You can always count on having at least one friend with a functioning NES, even if it needs to be coaxed into working. And that's not too bad for a console that's almost 25 years old. This is how people picture NES games. Not like this. Nobody really thought about keeping the box. The game just took care of itself. This is definitely not the case with games today. We need to protect our games because it's a dangerous world out there. For example, it's game over if your disc skids across the floor. On the other hand, an NES game can easily withstand such abuse. Just how tough are NES games? To find out, we're going to perform an experiment where several copies of a common NES game are subjected to unrealistic and impractical forms of neglect, to see which ones survive. We know they're tough, but just what kinds of abuse can they take? We don't want to destroy copies of a rare game and render it even more scarce, so we only used copies of the most abundant NES game in existence, Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. My local second-hand video game store is overrun with them, so I don't feel so bad about the potential for there to be a few less in the world. Each game was tested and confirmed to be in working order before the experiment. These 8 lucky participants are all perfectly healthy NES cartridges. How many will be left standing in the end? We're going to break the rules entirely this time by taking this cartridge and completely immersing it in alcohol. Not that kind. Yeah, rubbing alcohol. I think this cartridge will definitely work. Nintendo may warn against using alcohol to clean the cartridges, but I think most gamers agree that this was so Nintendo could sell their cartridge cleaning kits. A quick bath in alcohol probably won't hurt it at all. The cartridge was left to dry overnight and then tested in the morning. It worked no problem. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you forgot to take your NES game out of your pocket and it ended up going through the washing machine? Let's find out. Wow, it actually looks like it's having a good fun time in there. When the wash cycle was done, the cartridge looked a bit haggard. We left it to dry for 6 hours before popping it into the NES. I didn't think it would work, but it did. So you have nothing to worry about the next time it happens to you. Since it says on the back of the cartridge not to expose it to extreme temperatures, we're going to put one in the freezer overnight. When the frozen game was removed from the freezer the following day, it was left to thaw for a couple hours. Then it worked as if nothing ever happened. One cartridge is left outside for 3 days. Is it possible for one brave NES game to survive the Canadian outdoors in the winter? It will face below freezing temperatures, high winds, snow, and maybe even wild animals. The cartridge was buried in the snow by the end of the 3rd day. I was unsure if this one would survive. 3 days is a long time to be exposed to the elements. It gave us a bit of trouble, but it eventually worked. So if you find an NES game on the ground, pick it up and take it home. It might just work. Can an NES game survive having a hole drilled through it? Well, it certainly can if you completely miss the circuit board and only drill through the plastic. We drilled one hole through the game in an area we thought it might hit something major. Apparently it didn't, because it still worked. Hole number 3 would go directly through the contacts, as we all know how finicky those are. Once again, it still works. A 4th hole would once again hit the circuit board, and still have no effect on the performance of the game. With the 5th hole, we finally did some damage. It didn't even stay at the game selection screen. It went straight to Super Mario Bros. And it's dead. After the first playthrough, the cartridge would no longer run Super Mario Bros., but it played Duck Hunt just fine. Obviously, the 2 games are kept on different parts of the cartridge. This game has probably suffered enough, so it has been determined that an NES game can survive a hole being drilled through it, if you don't hit anything too vital. For this experiment, an NES game will be strapped to a ground firework. We would have used a firecracker, but they're illegal in Canada, so we'll have to settle for a jumbo dancing devil. The firework will be attached to the opening of the cartridge, so it will do the most damage to the circuit board. The plastic was singed and the cartridge smelled really bad, but it didn't appear to have melted the circuit board at all. The game still worked, but perhaps it wouldn't have if the flames had gone inside the cartridge instead of in the opposite direction. An NES game can certainly survive most falls it will experience when it lives a normal family life. But can it survive being dropped from a greater distance than is found in most homes? We took one of our NES games to a parking garage to find out. The plastic casing broke, exposing the circuit board within, but that appeared to be completely intact. When the bed-rego cartridge was tested, it worked perfectly. It was decided that the last cartridge would be hit by a car. It was anticipated that the force may shatter the circuit board, but apparently being hit once won't harm it at all. The plastic may have been crushed, but the goods inside remained unscathed. I think it's now clear that NES games are pretty tough. It was completely unprecedented that almost every cartridge would survive these experiments. I think we may have been too easy on them. We complain about the frailty of discs, but they have nothing to protect the information. NES games have this hard plastic casing that protects the game from all harm, like an exoskeleton. Maybe we'll have to bring out the big guns next time. Since it has such a defensive design, and there were millions of NES games in people's homes back in the system's heyday, it would be interesting to find out how many are still functioning today. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Happy gaming!